good afternoon. Representative Collins is here to join us. Happy New Year to all of you out there joining us. This is our first legislative webinar of 2021. Still have a hard time saying that. I was sharing with Representative Collins that my resolution for 2021 was to stop making fun of 2020. I've not been very good at that so far. But we are looking ahead, looking toward the new year, and of course the legislative session is in just a few weeks. So this is actually very timely. And of course, Representative Collins should be a familiar face to you. She is the chair of the House Education Policy Committee, and she also serves on the House Ways and Means Education Committee that crafts the education budget. So it's pretty safe to say if there's an education piece of legislation that's going to go through, Representative Collins is going to get a vote on it some way, somehow, in some manner. Those are two of the most impactful committees, and because of that, we deal a lot with Representative Collins, and of course appreciate her willingness to join us on that. She's been a House member since 2010. She represents Morgan County, and you'll probably hear her talk a lot about the 3 districts in her system, and she is truly an advocate for children. I've enjoyed working with her on a variety of task force, and she understands where local school boards are coming from. So we're going to jump right in the discussion. And in fact, I think it mirrors our discussion probably of about 10 minutes ago. Looking ahead at the session, I know there's probably nothing definitive yet, but how do you see the legislative session, which must begin February 2nd, actually playing out? We have heard or seen media accounts that perhaps you might come into session and recess to another time, whether or not public will be involved. So tell us what we think we know about the session at this time and date, knowing it could change.
Okay, well, I'm glad we've got that that disclosure out there to start with. We do start constitutionally on the 2nd, so it's coming up quickly. I've heard the same rumor that we might go in and pause, but I'm not hearing that from anybody really in the legislature. I think it's going to be different. I think right now there are 5 different rooms that they have set up with audio visuals, so for committee hearings, so that the public can participate in a way kind of like what we're doing right now. So as much as we can, we're wanting to make sure everybody can be included. You can still make individual appointments, and they're going to have meeting rooms set aside for that. These are some of the things I've heard, and like you said, it's all kind of rumor. It could change tomorrow, but I think you might see us with more of a couple of weeks on, maybe a week off, to kind of see where we go. I think a lot of them are anticipating there will be some type of people missing. I don't know if we'll be able to keep quorum the whole time. It's gonna be a very fluid situation. What I would say I'm hearing, they have got in the House and the Senate, they'll operate pretty similarly because they can spread out on their floor. In the House, because there's 105, spreading out is a little more challenging. We can't do it just on the floor. So it'll be on the floor, it'll be in the gallery, it will be in both of the overflow rooms on the 6th floor. I know you're familiar with that area. There are voting pads that we would have, even if you're on the floor, you could use. So you can use that, but you'll use it in one of those places. And so trying to make it as easy, if you watched or listened in on any of the spring when we were doing the budgets and the local legislation, anybody not on the floor was having to vote by voice vote on a microphone in a line. Yes. By roll call with 105 people. So that's not the way to do it. We learned how not to do it, and now hopefully we've got a better plan in place. So I think that's good. What I would say about session that I believe, now I'll also disclose, I am an eternal optimist, always. Always. My picture's there in the encyclopedia or whatever, but I believe we will start out with a lot of safety precautions in place. Mm-hmm. And hopefully as session moves on, we'll move to a more normal type session. That's what I hope. And I believe that. It may not get all the way to normal, but we'll be moving in that direction. I think the other thing, which I know we're going to get into funding issues because we always do, but I'll end with this one. I am hearing on a regular basis from the legislature that there is a desire to get budgets done sooner than later instead of waiting to the end, just in case something went wrong and we weren't able to get there. So I think there's a good potential that we could actually address budgets mid-session, maybe even getting it back. It starts in the Senate this year and getting it back in the House, maybe even as early as March. So that would be positive. We'll see how that works, but that would be very positive. I will say this, the Senate was supposed to have a caucus meeting Monday. So besides a pandemic and besides the chaos of the world right now and the elections and all, we had snow in North Alabama. So they weren't able to do that. So it's like every time you think you're going to make a decision and we're going to finalize some stuff and then roll that out to us and then to everyone, something gets in the way. So we'll see. But that's kind of what I'm hearing about session anyway.
In terms of the actual agenda, do you think that there'll be any preference given to bills that were introduced and close to passage last year, or will there be some, particularly in light of the fact that we hope not, but that there might be a periodic shutdown, because that's one of the issues out there, that there might be some priority given to, I say close but not finished last year.
Well, the last, really for the last quadrennium, one of the things that we've done that I've really liked is, that first week, like I checked my committee and Senate committee, Education, Ways and Means, to see kind of what's already there. And I don't know, I didn't see anything that stood out in either place, but so everything will drop that first week and you haven't had time to research it or anything. So one of the things they've been doing in leadership that I really support is taking those bills that were almost at completion the year before, and let's focus on those, because those have pretty much already been vetted. Most of us have already heard about most of that legislation. It's not starting something that you've never heard of before and having it on a fast track. It's stuff that's already been vetted. I know one of the ones that I think school boards was interested in that I had ready for a Senate vote that I was texting and trying to get through, and I was being told in the Senate, no, if we pass your bill, the House is going to close us down and leave. We can't do anything but budget and local legislation. But I was like, it's just an easy vote. And it was your leasing bill, the part that would put leasing into the competitive bid. So yes, I had two bills ready to go that were very simple. The other one was an annex, but we called it the Be Happy bill. So I really hope we do. And who knows, maybe this is the year to get that direct wine shipment that has nothing to do with education. But some weeks it might have everything to do with education. So we'll see how that goes. I think that there will be that same priority, though, to look at well-vetted legislation, things that we've already talked about. And I keep asking, and others do, if we'll prioritize certain things. Are we trying to limit what we're doing? And I'm not hearing any of that yet. It could still happen, but I'm not hearing it.
Okay, so, just it'll be our new normal for legislative sessions in terms of doing a lot like this. Committee hearings could be a little bit different in that sense, or still the process. What are you hearing about committee hearings?
I'm just hearing that's why we're wanting to use those audio visual rooms that are already set up, 5 of them. That way that we could make it as public, even if we're online, as possible. That's
Okay.
really all I'm hearing.
Well, that's good to go. There's always a positive as the point, when you're online, there actually may more engagement for people who don't have the time to
True.
drive to Montgomery, but may very well be interested. Okay, well, we might as well just jump right into it. What are we hearing about the budget? That's always a key issue. This year is a little bit different. It's positive. So tell us what we know and can expect in the Education Trust Fund budget.
Well, the budget year we're in right now, we saw growth, which was unusual. We are excited about that. We had increases. We tried to put a lot of those increases towards things that school boards and other education advocates had requested, like mental health, like cybersecurity, like in the classroom. We had a reserve we held back from some of the reserve from last year's budget that was an overage from the balance. And so we should have about 315 million that we ended up not needing, but I think that's a good thing. So we've got the growth we had, we've got the surplus that was left over from the 2020 budget. We are ticking along first quarter. That's going to be the thing about starting even in February. It's not January, but in February, we don't have a huge trend for what our economy is doing. But right now we're about a 2.5% growth, which is good. It's not flat, and it is positive. So I think that's good. I think that, and I've heard lots of comments about holding districts kind of a hold harmless on teacher units and things like that, because we know we have some missing students. I think we may have a year where we look at that formula a little bit different with some exceptions to that. I'm hearing a lot about that. So I feel like we may just kind of keep some things level because we're just not sure what it'll look like. School has looked so different since last March. I believe that we're going to have some growth this year. And so how we would use that additional spending will be good. Will be interesting to watch how it goes. I always like to remind everybody, especially school boards. I know when I met with my superintendent and my school board back in 2010, when I was first elected, the number one thing they asked for was to try to not have proration. And so for 11 years, we have not had proration. And so I think that's good. I think we do a good job of conservatively budgeting, trying to use the money wisely, trying to listen to what education advocates have to say about the best uses for those money. But there's always more things that we want and need. I think as I go through the list, with some of the things that have happened with our cybersecurity, I think you'll see some increases in that will continue to be needed. And I guess we're using those monies wisely. And I think the committee, Ways and Means Committee, appreciates when we can prove that. So I think that's good. I think we will all continue to see mental health as an issue. I know that some of the basic things, transportation, nurses, some things like that are good. I actually met with some of my local people and mentioned something about the additional professional development days, which would be a salary increase, even though it was more days. And I wanted to hear locally what those teachers and people thought about that, and was really surprised. It was a very positive response. They were very pleased. I mean, some of it based on the fact that some of the professional development is required and they end up getting paid on a stipend and not at their salary level. So but they were positive overall about that. So I think that's good. One of the things I wanted to share was I was on a call last week with other states with the Biden education transition team. And just so you know, some of the things that we agree on, every state talked about the federal government using their dollars to help us expand broadband, that it should be like we expanded electricity. It's just a national need, not just education, but definitely education, but economic development. we need help expanding that to each and every user. Mental health, unanimous support for the federal government using dollars that would let us address the mental health needs with students, with teachers, with staff, with everybody. Using federal dollars for intervention type things. We know we're going to have learning gaps. So how can we address that with tutors, mentoring, after school, before school, summer school, using some federal dollars that would actually be given out, most of us requested, like in a grant type money, so that it's directed in every area where that area needs it. Because especially in Alabama, each area looks so different. All of your school board areas address different issues. And so that, I think, is going to be really important. And to hear the things we agreed on were encouraging. To hear that we're one of the only states that's not facing teacher cuts and different things like that is encouraging as well. Also, one of the things that many of your school boards have done, and I want to thank you and say it took courage and you were truly advocates for the children, but to keep our children in school. I'm a believer that's probably where they're the safest, and that's where they are proving that they're not the big carriers or the receivers of that. There are always exceptions, but that some of the gaps in our state may not look as bad as some of the gaps in other states, because there are many of them that are still completely online and they don't know where their students are. So while we have some we don't know, we're not in such a bad place. And I think that's going to be a good thing. So.
Well, interesting in terms of the budget, it's always nice to have funds like that. You mentioned additional professional development days, and, you know, that is also tied to the concept of a raise, you know, and there are some who believe, well, if you're making me work for it, it's not a raise, but nonetheless, a raise is an issue we hear a lot about. So any conversations, what do we think might be doable?
I think it's early. I think
Okay.
we're just now getting to see. I wouldn't have known about the 2.5% growth trend, except for I was going to get on this call and going to be expected to share from Alabama's perspective what we were looking like. So I'm sure there are those conversations. I would be uncomfortable committing one way or another what that would look like. I've heard the same rumors you have. People have talked about using some of the additional CARES money that's come in and things like that. But I think you use one-time money for one-time expenses, and a salary is not a one-time expense. Maybe we could do something with that would be working something. But as far as the salary base, I don't think you'll see our Ways and Means Committee commit to do that, because we want to make sure what we're doing is sustainable and is reasonable. I think all of us would love to see some type of a raise for teachers that we know have gone above and beyond the call of duty since last March, and that we truly appreciate that. We know a lot of them are working in spite of fears and concerns that they legitimately have. And so I think that we'll have good discussions about that. But like I said before we got on the call, normally when I come and speak to y'all, I've had several meetings with Ways and Means, with policy, you know, just on discussing issues as caucus, as and we've not this time. It's been very different. So I don't know what that will look like on raises, and I really don't want to venture a guess this early.
And that's certainly fair. Didn't mean to sound like I was trying to get pin you down. I think it was well stated. Someone said there's a lot of agreement that a raise is needed and appropriate. It's just the how or how much, you know, are still, you know, policy issues that people are discussing. So that's part of that. And of course, as school boards who have to look at funding from year to year, we're with you in the sense, one time, you can't use one-time money for continuing expenses. But the addition of the federal money complements what we're seeing on the state level, should give us an opportunity to leverage a variety of initiatives. And you already mentioned broadband. That's an issue being discussed on the federal level, but as well as on the state level, and something we certainly have seen as an issue. You mentioned the drop in student enrollment. Dr. Mackey shared with superintendents on a webinar last week that it looks like there's, very productive discussion on a way to have a stabilization fund, kind of to hold folks harmless, but also not penalize those school systems that actually see growth over year to year. So I think we're very close, and there's a lot of agreement. In fact, one school board member asked me, do we need to rally the forces with legislators on this issue? And based on what you're saying and what I'm hearing, I think there's a lot of knowledge and agreement that that is something that we can and should do in the upcoming session. Well, obviously, we're still dealing with the coronavirus. What type of legislation would you think you might see, or have you heard about related to that, both in the education realm and I guess just generally in terms of how the state has proceeded? Can we anticipate bills related to that?
I think you can always anticipate bills that will be all across the board, and you will be. I mean, I know I looked in the Senate, we've got Star Spangled Banner, so we can go all the way from there to who knows what we will get to. But I think that you also see the change in Tier 2, which I think has been very important to school boards as
Yes.
well as they recruit teachers and things like that. I think that the compromise that we got to kind of towards the end is where we're starting this time. So I think that's a lot better. Representative Baker's worked hard with different people. I think you've had good support for that in the House. And the Senate is, you have a few holdbacks. I'll just say it that way. And I'm really not hearing they're not holdbacks. So I think there will be still work to do on that. But for those same good reasons too, that they want to make sure, and all of us do, that what we do is sustainable. I think that where we're starting is a really good balance. I think encouraging being able to use those sick days to roll over, and that encourages us to stay in school, which is critical right now. I think that's going to be good. I mentioned that leasing bill and the competitive bidding thing. I'm hoping that will be easy. I had a STEM council bill to work with math and science and engineering, and the governor actually used executive order to set that up, and we had a first P20 council meeting yesterday. So I think that's for our data system, but we've also had the STEM council meeting, and a lot of the things that I've had legislation or we've talked about are kind of getting set up, and we might have to see some legislation. But also, I want to say we had legislation for the mental health regulations and things that we've seen has been able to work out in just the rules and the regulations without legislation, just the funding. And we're one of the states, if you look at us in our code, we don't legislate pre-K. We just fund quality pre-K. If we can just fund some things without actually having it a part of our code and everybody's working together, I think some of those are the wisest way to move forward. And so you might see some STEM council or something on the longitudinal data system, or some different things like that. But if we get it working without that, I don't know. We'll just have to see. I know one of the areas school boards is very, very interested in, and Sally and I served on an SREB roundtable with about teacher quantity and quality. I called it TQ squared. But we have some pilots we're going to roll out that may look a little different and all, but I think they have such potential, especially if you're in an area that struggles to meet your quality teacher quantity and quality, that they would be worthy of trying. We've got some ideas and some people that have been doing this in other states and seeing a lot of success. And so as we roll out that report pretty soon, you'll get to see that. And it's a slow fix. It's not overnight. It's not a silver bullet, but I believe it has a lot of potential to be very helpful. Plus, we also address some other things to try to really help you get teachers, quality teachers, trained up and in the classroom quicker, and using some of the things that we've already got set in place, trying to get streamline some of those processes without losing our quality, which is the balance you have to work with. Trying to think anything else. I've looked the last couple of years about some, it's a biliteracy type thing that I think would be very helpful. When I was in high school, which is a billion years ago, but to get your, college preparatory, you had to have a foreign language, and that's really not there now. But I still think that there's some value in that, especially in the workforce. And so anyway, I've been looking into that, and we'll see how that continues. But happy to answer any specifics. I know one thing that will probably come up is, the Literacy Act doesn't actually implement until 2022. And so what I've been working with the department and with the task force and with the new grade level committee and all of the different areas, actually have a meeting Friday with a local quality teacher. What we would like to do, and I'd hoped we would have it ready by the start of this semester, and we haven't, and I didn't know that, but anyway, to streamline and to reduce some of the compliance and the regulation areas so that everyone that's teaching in that classroom can simply focus on teaching reading to children. That if we'll just keep our intent on the children and teaching reading and try to streamline some of the compliance issues, I think that's going to make a big difference. And every time I talk with whether it's superintendents or teachers or principals, that's what I'm hearing is their greatest need. Let's focus on the intent of the bill, which is to teach reading, and let's see what we can limit on some of the compliance issues. And so we are already working on that, have been since October, trying to kind of streamline that and trying to get that word out in a unified voice, so one area doesn't hear it differently than another area. But
that's always
overall,
a communication challenge. Yeah.
Overall, I think we're moving forward. I know that we'll see gaps, but we just don't know where those are. We really just got regional specialists out in the field this last fall. As always, there have been, attendance issues and different things like that. And so I guess I've seen it work, so I know we can do it in Alabama. And I hope that we'll just keep moving forward, knowing that we're watching and we understand that there are gaps and there are problems and there are issues, but let's keep moving forward as much as we can. Task force is still working on some of those quality issues. We're about to set up our state board will vote on some of our language standards. I think with y'all and with the regional specialists, I spoke on about 5 different conference calls in August, and I kept describing it. I know that we're trying to fly this plane while we're building it, but let's keep moving forward because I see that we are moving forward.
Okay, so to address, and there's angst out there, but if I hear you correctly, you're saying that, the retention aspect of the bill and the remediation aspect of the bill, that would be summer school this year. And I think the department is requesting funding for summer school, but of course, learning loss is something we're going to focus on anyway as a result of COVID. How do you see those two issues working together?
I think some of it, like I mentioned, may be kind of a good storm in the sense that the federal government understands this is an issue. If we're gonna get some additional federal money to address this issue, and we're addressing it with the state, I know we've put in every single year what the department requested for those summer school things, but then we've had a year that was just crazy, and we can't really guarantee where we're gonna be this next summer, but hopefully we're starting to get back to normal and we're working. And if we've got local money to address that, and not local funding, but if we've got state money that goes to the local areas to address it, and we've got federal funding that's coming in that can be used to address it, I think that might be that good storm I'm talking about, where they actually work together to try to tide us over as we move forward.
Well, I think it's interesting how that issue ties into looking at pay for our educators, because I think, just as a reminder out there, many times when our professional educators are doing PD or other supplemental jobs in the summer, they're not paid at their regular rate. They're paid at stipends, that are far less than they would earn. And so when you look at overall competitiveness of salaries or making sure that our teachers earn more, all that factors into the quality, quantity, and retention issues. So I was really pleased that you brought up tier 3 or the modifications, because the longer we delay doing that, the more challenging it is to do, or the higher the price tag. So hopefully this will be the optimal time to work on that. State assessments, I think you touched on that a little bit already. And do you, whether or not with the new administration there'll be wiggle room on the accountability provisions, I guess is now an open question again. Where do you see the legislature doing this in terms of state policy and labeling failing schools?
The only thing I would say is that, a lot of that's already said in what we're doing. We didn't get any data last year. And so what I would think would be most appropriate, I guess, this time too, is to look at what we are and where we are, and to use that not as a stick, but as a carrot and as a funding decision about where our gaps are and where we need to add additional resources. So I think if we would, I'm a believer that we need to be, our ACAP test, we have no baseline. So even if this is just a baseline, that we even know as a baseline is not completely accurate. I think everybody understands that it's been a different year, but just to get a leveling, a first start, I think is important. I'm an advocate of that. I think Dr. Mackey right now is an advocate of, let's just get a baseline. But just like I mentioned that I did with on the call with Biden's transition team, not to use as a penalty, not to use as a punishment, but to use the information and the data so that we can actually address those needs. And so I believe you'll hear more talk about that in the legislature.
All right. And I guess the only topic that we really haven't talked about that's out there is any thoughts now on the effectiveness of virtual education or lessons learned. One of the issues, you're always proud of the innovation in your area. Let's look at different ways to do things. What lessons do you think we're learning about, virtual education?
I think we're learning it's difficult. I think that we're learning it's a different way to do education, but yet I've heard across the state both positive and the challenges. I've heard teachers say, while yes, it's hard, and yes, they didn't love it at first, they actually believe they're better teachers now because of what they've had to learn to do virtually. And so I found that really interesting. I think what you learn that you can do virtually is really impressive. I know as my grandchildren would stay with me, and my granddaughter's dyslexic, so actually hearing her meet with her special teacher and hearing the questions and hearing what they would do as the grandmom across the room, I found that fascinating and very helpful. I think I believe that we'll always have some students that, for whatever reasons, virtual is going to be their best option, and that we're going to always have that as a part of what we're doing. I think that we are going to learn a lesson that the best education is in person with that student, with that teacher. And I hope that we keep moving to get back there. One reason I'm a big advocate for that ACAP test, Sally, is so that we kind of see that. Once you know what some of that data looks like, you can then compare that to who was doing all online, who was doing a blended, who was doing all in person. How did that look? How did that affect those learning gaps? How did it do with poverty students? How did it do with students of color? How did it, all those differences will be in that data. And getting that data to me is going to be very, very helpful. And to me, I think we might be in a place for the first time too, to actually use some of that surplus of dollars to address some of those learning gap needs. I think that would be the best thing to help us move our state forward. One of the things I'm hearing, and it doesn't address school boards, but it kind of does in the long run. One of the other things that came up on these conference calls with all states talking to the federal government is childcare. And that if we can get quality childcare, not only does that help economic development, getting our parents back to work, but it prepares those children so that they're ready to learn when they get to school. And so that really is a K-12 issue. It's just an early one.
And as you know, yeah, I know you're a proponent of pre-K, and that ties into that too. That's not childcare per se, but that readiness issue. So we have a question that has come in about line items in the budget for costs associated with the Literacy Act. So any discussions, or what do you see happening? I think summer
What do
school.
you think they mean by that question?
Um, uh, yeah, is there any more on the question than? No, sorry.
Okay, well then
But
I'll just do my best.
my guess is it would be, of course, the summer school, the tutoring, the remediation, some of the, requirements that are coming from that. Staff is a little is spread thin, so that would be. And I apologize for the if that's not the right intent of the question. That's what I see is coming from that.
Well, I'll go back. The year we passed Literacy Act, I was working with the department on what those funding needs were going to be for professional development, for summer school, for some of those things that happen. And, we had actually started professional development for the Literacy Act the year before we introduced the legislation. So we had so many teachers, 200 and something, already going through. So then we were able to add, I don't know, it seems like to me it was over 7,000. We added a lot of teachers in that as we continue to roll it out, trying to get that right. And that professional development, while we thought we had funded it accurately, we actually ended up using some grant money from early childhood to kind of tide us over until the next budget started. But we have continued to try to fund Literacy Act at what the department was asking for summer school, even that first year it passed, for summer school professional development this last year. And I would say it's a priority. Senator Orr is the budget chair in the Senate, and he was the Senate sponsor. Representative Poole, budget chair in the House, and the committee all support the goals and know that in order to do it, we're going to have to fund it. So our experience of how we funded it in the past at the requested level continues to be what we plan to do in the future. It may not look like a line item. And the reason that would be, that's why I asked that about the question, Sally, is because what one district and board needs, it's going to look different than what another. And so it might not be a line item issue. It may be an overall, this is what we need. And so not just funding by line item, if that makes sense.
Yeah, as long as the money's there, it's not the way it is featured in the budget, and to make sure it at the adequate levels for each school system. All right, we've done at least 30 minutes. I mean, I guess if 30 minutes was our time time period, we're a little bit over that. We have reserved the hour. So are there other issues you want to address? Because I think we've got a good insight as to what to expect, so far based on what we know today on
Today, which
January
could all
12th.
change tomorrow. I'm trying to think. A lot of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, we have discussed. That's what I didn't know if this was a 30 minutes or an hour. I think you all heard me say at the very beginning of the thing, I was asking how long. So, which would have been a great question at 10 till the hour, not once we started. But if 30 minutes was our gap, I think everybody always is excited to get extra time that you don't use all of. I think that finishing early is always a good thing, not a bad thing. I mean, I could repeat some of the things. I think that we're going to be in a positive budget situation. I don't think it's going to be a windfall budget situation. I would ask that we remember as school board people the positives, that we've not had proration in over a decade, very positive, that we passed a bond issue that let you address a lot of your capital needs, which is also a very positive, in a great year to do it. We increased, we're hearing what you're saying. And I guess that's another thing too. I encourage you as board members, if there are some specific needs in your systems, to reach out to your local representatives and senators, but also even to us, and let us know what those specifics are and how we can best be helpful. As when we talk to the federal government, we hammer the flexibility word. Oh, please let us have flexibility. So I would bet that's where you are with the state level as well. So I think that we have heard that over the year. I know we continue to try to increase our OCE, which is what gives you the most flexibility. We continue to try to fund the things we hear about, whether it's mental health or the cyber or classroom funding needs, Literacy Act. All of those things are things that we want to do, and we're hearing good things. I mean, those are budgets that have been passed unanimously in the past few years. And my understanding is that that was never a truth before. So I think we're working together and we are listening. So if you've got some specifics, be sure to reach out and let us know.
Well, thank you. And that's one of the things I've always found. You always have an open door. You're willing to address questions. And not that I want you to increase the amount of email that you get, but you're always very responsive to people that reach out to you and have questions about perhaps a piece of legislation you sponsored. So we really appreciate that. And the time and energy you put into doing, they say it's a part-time legislative job, but I know that you spend, looking at your eyes, you spend a lot of time and effort to be well informed and to look at what's going on in other states and nationally to ensure that we're competitive and keeping up. So did we have any other questions? We had one more question. Okay. All right. This actually, my is, this relates to one of our teacher TQ squared issues. What can you tell us about legislation dealing with micro-credentialing in the teacher certification area? I know we talked.
I wish I could remember some of the specifics. Sally, you may remember some of that as much as I do. It was definitely a part of our teacher quantity and quality roundtable, trying to streamline some of that certification, but still require those good standards for that. Trying to remember a specific about that right now, Sally.
And I know we were generally supportive, but that Dr. Mackey and the team at the SDE were already working on that. And so our goal was not to if I'm remembering this correctly, not to get into that, but that was an issue. One of the things we realized is that I know even one of the administrator organizations working on micro-credentialing, as are the university, you know, many of the teacher ed prep programs. So I think there is a lot of work going on. I don't know that we talked about legislation per se, but we had several deans on the committee and the department, and they were all talking about perhaps doing some of that. I think relating, now it might take administrative code changes for
Yes.
the department for that to count for some of the PD, but
And I know I've met in meeting with some of the higher education colleges and universities. That always comes up. And when I'll ask about, well, I think you have a legislature that's very open to limiting, you know, regulations and streamlining some things. Tell me what those specifics are. And then I never quite get back. You know, there's never really a follow-up with what those specifics are. It's kind of like what regulations can we limit or streamline even on the Literacy Act? Everybody wants it less, but when you get down to the specifics about what you want to cut out, they're like, oh no, don't cut that out. Oh no, well that serves this purpose. So anyway, we are very open to that. I think we're listening. I will say that they're looking at that. I know I met with one college Friday morning, and they were talking about they were doing some credentialing and some it was a new word. I'd never heard of that. I'm trying to remember what the word was right now, but it wasn't a credential, but it would be some type of an endorsement that you could actually even use on your resume. So that if you were doing a LinkedIn something, that endorsement, and it was actually a little insignia that you would see, would be something they would look for. It was more of a branding thing. Because I said, is this standardized? Are there qualifications for it? And there really weren't. So it's something new, but I think you're going to see a lot of us working. I'm seeing it at the higher ed area and the community college area, and I think that's good. So if they've got some specifics that they want us to consider, please let us know, because we're very open to that, Sally.
okay, sounds good. That's it for the chat box? So we kind of hit the second half hour in the midpoint. So if you're expecting an hour, you get 15 more minutes. And if not, you know, we went over time. So we just appreciate you. And as I said, the open door. Thank you for your time and commitment, and always be willing to listen. And hopefully we'll see you in person, or at least on the screen
too.
on a more regular
I
basis.
I look forward to walking up that hill and coming in your back door, so which looks like your front door. I want to say to your people that you represent, though, Sally, I always appreciate working with you and with Lisa and with the school boards. You know, locally, I know my school boards, and I'm glad to hear from them. But a lot of times I even hear from them through y'all, because you're on top of their issues. You're good to share them with me. I appreciate that. So y'all do a good job representing the people you represent. And I also thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Have a good day.